Hello everyone and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Will Schick, Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass Games. Excited for you to be here with me today. We're going to be continuing on kind of our look back following Mini Stravaganza at some of our iconic characters that came out in the first waves of Marvel Crisis Protocol. If you missed Mini Stravaganza, specifically the Future of MCP Mini Stravaganza panel, you'll know that we talked a lot in that panel about how we are going back, looking at character changes from that initial batch of characters, doing some revamping, bringing them into our full understanding of Marvel Crisis Protocol. Those character changes and adjustments you're going to be seeing us covering over the next several weeks, and as we get closer to the actual launch of those characters coming out in a PDF form. Cards will be coming for those who want to buy new physical cards for them next year in a card pack. So lots of exciting stuff coming up. Today, we're going to be looking at Captain Marvel. So I'm going to be painting up a Captain Marvel. Tune in next week. You're going to be able to see Dallas Kemp painting Ultron as we continue kind of our look back at the core box. And of course, we're not going to talk specifically about these changes yet. There's more information to come. There's a couple of articles. We're going to be showing off the cards in full during gameplay streams and stuff like that. But obviously, anyone that you see us kind of going back to and taking a look at, it's a pretty good chance that there's going to be some kind of change or adjustment that's going to be happening with those characters. So let's just dive in and relook at this Captain Marvel from the core box. And you'll notice that I did do something a little different because this will be the fourth Captain Marvel that I've painted. I did go in and I grabbed a spare Gamora head and I swapped the original head of Captain Marvel with the short, the short choppy hair, and I gave her a bit more of a longer haired version. So we have a bit more of the Carol Danvers with the longer style, the longer do. But overall, really easy to do these kinds of swaps if you find yourself with extra heads or additional kind of options there. Really easy to just change the entire feel and look of a miniature with some very simple stuff. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just dive right in. And I'm going to be using all Chimera colors today. I have a wet palette out. This is like the second time I've used a wet palette. So we're just going to see how things go. And I'm going to start out with the blue of the costume. I'm using some phthalo blue with the red shade. Grab a little bit of that. And we're just going to come in and get to work. So I hope everyone out there had a wonderful weekend, is excited for our next week of streaming. We're going to be back tomorrow with more stuff, Thursday with gameplay streams, all that good stuff. So we got a lot of things coming. But for today, we're just going to work on doing a new classic version of Captain Marvel. So I'm just going to be following the traditional colors for the good Captain here, which means blues, reds, and a little bit of yellows. And we're just going to have some fun and see how everything kind of works out going forward here. So I'm just going to kind of block out our normal colors. And then we'll get back in and start doing some shading and some highlighting and all that good stuff. No, not really any spoilers today. We did talk during the panel about one of the changes that'll be coming to Captain Marvel. So if you missed that during Mini Stravaganza, I'm probably okay to say it again here, which is that the binary form superpower for Captain Marvel is going down in cost from 5 to 4, which was definitely a significant value change. And that's been largely the approach for most of the changes. We showed off Green Goblin last week. Certainly one of the characters that had a bit more of an adjustment, although even then those adjustments were really simple, kind of like number changes. So if you missed that or don't know what I'm talking about, we played a game with the Web Warriors versus the Spider Foes last week. Pagani and I had a blast doing that. I went in with a plan to pull off Craven's Fearful Symmetry Team Tactic card and turn him into Spider-Man, and then everything went pear-shaped, and I abandoned that plan, but in the end, the Spider Foes won the day, so I guess it's probably fine. Still disappointed. I'll get him. I'll get him someday. Someday his Spider-Man will be my Spider-Man. But, kind of bring it back around. Green Goblin that we showed off last week has seen his pumpkin bomb attack, gain 1 strength on each side. So went from a strength 4 attack on his healthy side to strength 5. Went from a strength 5 attack on his injured side to strength 6. So he builds power a lot more effectively on that healthy side, which is really good for him. And then the leadership had a really minor adjustment that is also quite meaningful. It took the power cost off. So once per turn, the spider foes or character under that spider foe's leadership can force their target to reroll one of their defense dice. Super good, especially becomes at the end of the timing chart, so there's not really anything that other characters can do to affect it. So it's pretty punishing. It's like 70% of the time it guarantees that you're going to push one additional damage through, which of course on attacks that you're looking to build power with can be quite impactful because it means you're getting 1 power initially. So it doesn't take a lot. And that's kind of been our approach in general, is just looking at, okay, where are the values kind of off? How do we adjust those values with the lightest of touch to bring everything back in line and make it all work the way that we want it to, give a little bit of additional life to these characters here, and keep things moving forward. So it's been a great process. I'm excited for everyone who's excited about like new Captain America, who showed off during the stream, Mini Stravaganza. I've seen new Hulk causing some waves, which is great because it's one of the most iconic Marvel characters. He definitely should. And the game's first 6-threat character, of course. So it's been nice to be able to go back and kind of look at with fresh eyes and our greater understanding of the game in general and where we want to go with it and all that stuff. Because just like with hobbying and everything else, you get better the more you do it. And you start to learn things that before you might have not understood fully. And definitely, we talked about a little bit during the original stream, when we were testing almost all of these characters that we're now taking a second look at 2 years later from release and a lot later from when they were initially designed and tested. You know, the game wasn't even out. We did it all behind closed doors, and we had an amazing group of play testers, but a lot of that stuff is like you're learning the systems, you're learning the play patterns. And so there are times where things in that initial batch just seemed really, really potent. And so they got tested and adjusted accordingly based on all the feedback and everything. And then, the perfect plan gets out into the world and you find out that, hey, there's a bit of a different approach, or there's better ways to do what you wanted to accomplish. And then you have to go back, and sometimes you just kind of accept the fact that if it's not broken, you don't fix it. And sometimes the opportunity comes up, like it did with the localization of the cards, that you can go back and make some adjustments to everything and change it around. So that's what we got to do. I'm really excited to be able to do it. It's going to be pretty awesome. The alt head, for those asking who might have missed it, this is Gamora's head. So this is just a spare head that I had lying around because I had an extra Gamora that I originally had a plan for and then wound up not using. So I was like, well, might as well and put it to some good use, right? So a very simple and easy swap to make, honestly. I just cut off the peg that attaches Gamora's head, and it fits nice and neat right onto Captain Marvel. So for the highlight, I just took the phthalo blue and I added a bit of white to it. We're going to keep things pretty simple today. And now I'm just going to go in and blend in some of these highlights, start building up everything. But working with those limited Chimera colors, we're just doing practice. So something like Captain Marvel with a really simple straightforward kind of color palette is perfect for this because I'm still learning these new paints and I'm learning the wet palette. And so there's a lot of variables going on right now that you're watching somewhat live. I did do a little test on a different miniature that I was painting this morning with the wet palette and stuff, just to kind of get a feel for it, but I'm still very much a novice at getting the most out of the tool and everything else. So we'll probably make some mistakes and not do it perfectly, and it won't work great, but hey, that's why we're doing it live. I like doing stuff like this so you can just kind of see that despite everything else and all that, we're always learning new things. And the process of learning involves a lot of mistakes, you know, and a bit of like trial and tribulation and error and all that stuff, and that's okay. That's a great BK question. I don't know if we've talked about like trying to get more of the paint lines on, or the paints being used on kind of social media stuff and everything. We've talked about a couple of different ways to do that, but I'm sure it's like a BK Ash situation where they're hard at work. A lot of the times we try to keep everything agnostic of line and stuff because everybody has different, you know, you all have different paints in your toolbox and all that. And well, each paint line and color can be slightly different, and it can be helpful to have the same color if we can just kind of show the technique. And the last thing I want is for everyone to feel like they have to go out and buy whatever paint to match what we're doing on stream, because you can do everything that we're doing. Oops. So I'm not used to having this like screen where my paints are. I totally just nailed it. But you can do everything that we're doing technique-wise and all of that with whatever paint you have in your arsenal. We stick to teaching you how to paint, not what to paint, because then it allows you to utilize everything that you have, not have to run out and go buy a whole bunch of new hobby supplies if you don't want to. If you do, then that's great. I certainly have purchased a large repository of tools over the years. And of course, I continue to add to that, like I'm doing here, with these new Chimera colors. But I thought these would be fun just because it will force me kind of to get better at understanding my color theory, because you get a limited palette, but you can mix pretty much anything out of them. And then of course, I love the saturation on these colors. They're just so vibrant. And honestly, even if I was just using them to wash over the Mini, it would work almost perfectly. So they definitely have their uses, but I do love the vibrancy that you get out of them. So back to Captain Marvel's card. The one thing we did talk about during the stream and during Mini Extravaganza was that binary is going from 5 to 4, which may not sound initially like a ton, but once you start digging into it and playing with her, with that big change, it becomes huge, because in Captain America's Avengers, so core box Steve Rogers, who also got that big bump, binary goes from 4 to 3, which means that she's reliably doing it by round 2. I mean, I guess you could do it round 1, as long as you can pull off a couple energy blasts, but then you would lose out on its effects for the offensive capability, you'd gain that huge defensive bump. So situationally, you might want to use it round 1 and just sacrifice the +2 dice to attacks. I normally wouldn't. I've not been in many situations where I was like, I needed the +2 dice because I put her in a high danger situation on round 1, especially when she gets to double tap because she's got to move. So you're looking at a round 2 binary, and then once you're there, it's very easy to maintain binary for the whole game, if that's what you want to do, because that cost 3 is so much more accessible. And then if you're not playing her within Steve Rogers' Avengers, cost 4 is still really achievable in the other affiliation that she really likes to be in, which is A-Force, because A-Force can feed her that power through the She-Hulk leadership really easily too. So overall, giving her greater access to binary, which is kind of the life she wants to live, and part of the coolest part of her abilities, was a huge boost to her overall effectiveness and the enjoyment that you get out of playing her. So a very simple but super impactful change. And that's really been the story overall, with the exception sort of the new Hulk. Because new Hulk obviously has a bit more going on than just that. Although I would argue that outside of him having that brand new Hulk not puny banner power, really everything else is just kind of a number change. The last big thing being that his strike does build power now, which it didn't before. But that's been the big, I mean, really, there hasn't been a whole lot of cause for major overhauls or rewrites. It's just little number tweaks here and there. Changing the size restriction on Captain America's ability to throw and push. Adjusting a height here or there. Adding a once per turn clause in some cases. Ooh, that's really bright. A little too much white in there. We'll just scrub that away and go back and adjust it. Six cost characters are supposed to scare the crap out of you. And, you know, like we talked about a little bit during Mini Stravaganza, and I've alluded to before, 6th threat Hulk in that initial testing wave and everything did scare the crap out of everyone. In fact, he was so overtuned based on all the feedback and stuff and what we were seeing out of that initial batch, that is part of the reason why he wound up with no power generation on his strike and the unique power generation alone and all that stuff, you know. But like I mentioned, as you kind of see things advance and grow and you gain better understanding, you start to learn, okay, well, maybe we undertuned that a little bit because we were really worried about it blowing out the game, but instead something that you didn't really think was going to be as impactful becomes the thing that makes all the difference in the world based on evolving play patterns and all of that. So, bow to the will of MODOK. Lets MODOK bully people way too much, and it needs to be turned into a once per turn kind of ability. And once you do that, then he becomes tuned for his threat cost 5 with maybe a couple other adjustments. You know, all that stuff are just things that you learn and you adapt to and you get better at. And one of the great things about playtesting so much of this stuff all together is that it gives you a really nice pool to compare everything to. But miniature game development or any lifestyle game development is like a garden. You know, you plant seeds and you grow it and you cultivate it and you assume that what you're making and what you're doing, you know, will bear fruit. And they'll make like a beautiful location to hang out in and all that stuff. But nature has a way of growing in unpredictable patterns. And sometimes you got to come back in and say, okay, well, this didn't quite sprout the way I wanted it to, or I've learned now that this is not the right color for this part of the garden. What do we do? So even perfectly planted things, you got to come back in and trim and maintain. There's a lot of maintenance that goes along with that, right? Come in and prune some things, come in and do other stuff. So and that's where the banned and restricted stuff comes from. We've talked a bit about that over the course. Being able to adjust and tune. And it's our big thing to never have to ban, or especially ban, but also restrict characters and stuff. And I think, despite things sometimes being a little off or the curve being a little wide, I'm very happy and proud of the work that we've been able to do in development and then through our amazing play testers and stuff to keep everything kind of well in line with everything else. And I think our bell curve has been fairly tight, especially given the amount of characters that we've been able to crank out over the short lifespan of the game. But having that opportunity to go back in, like I said, and make some bigger adjustments is definitely pretty exciting. And I'm thrilled to be able to do that stuff. How far back will the character changes go? So it's difficult for me to kind of do that because the way in which the characters were developed is not really the way in which they were released. There are things that came out much later than they were intended to because of reasons and were developed kind of initially in the batch that we're looking at. And then there are characters that were developed at that time that came out. It's like all discombobulated. And part of that is due to a bit of the pandemic. Some of it is just due to the vagaries of how production and licensing and everything else can work. So there's not like a cutoff. It's not based on a CP number. It's not really based on a release month. It's very much just based on the characters and where they were in our development cycle and which ones came first and which ones came later. Kind of, I guess, the best benchmark, which again, if I say anything, then my concern is that then it becomes the gospel truth and it's like, well, that's not really what I meant. But games of telephone are dangerous. But the best benchmark that I can give you is up to and not including the X-Men launch is kind of the easiest marker. So if it released before the X-Men, it's probably getting looked at. Not in every case, because there are certain things that beat the X-Men that were designed and developed after the X-Men. Again, just because of the way everything turned out, and we had a pandemic and all that other fun stuff. But if you really want a little bit of a marker, that's probably your best bet. So balancing perfect on. I wish I could say that, I think these characters are perfect. My honest answer to that, though, is that I don't think anything's perfectly balanced. That's not our goal. Everything's going to have a little bit of a curve. Like, are there designs that I think work really, really well and that I'm very happy with? Absolutely. I do really like Midnight Suns a lot. I think they're super interesting and intriguing. They have their strengths and their weaknesses, and they're just fun, like from both a play standpoint, a theme standpoint, everything. But do I think they're perfect balance? Absolutely not. But our goal isn't to perfectly balance anything. We've talked about this a lot during mini extravaganza streams and stuff. But it's not our goal to perfectly balance everything. It would be a boring game if everything was perfectly balanced, quote unquote. Our goal is to balance in a way that there is always a bell curve. So, the bell curve can be my fingers. Like, even if the bell curve's touching, there's still a space. There's that invisible layer of air between everything. Our goal is to make those ends of the bell curve, which were represented by my chubby fingers, to be as close as possible, but to never be on top of each other. Because once you do that, everything has to be the same. And that's not interesting. And it also isn't interesting from a player perspective. There's always going to be a segment of people out there, of players, who like taking things that might be a little less efficient than the overall pile, and using either their tactics or their strategy or some creativity to make them more efficient. There's a group of players who only want to play the most efficient things, and they'll find the most efficient manners and play styles, and they'll play that way. And then I think most of us just want to play with our favorite characters. So I love Captain Marvel because she's the first comic book character my wife was willing to read, followed closely by She-Hulk. So when I play Captain Marvel, it has a meaningful reason to me because I love the character for a number of different reasons. I don't really care if she's the most efficient option. All I care about is that, she doesn't completely hamstring me in a normal game. So if she's a little under the curve, that's fine. If she's a little over the curve, well, better for me. But I'm not playing her because she's over the curve. I'm playing her because she's my favorite character, or one of my favorite characters. And that is why you don't look for perfect balance. You look for as narrow a bell curve as possible while still making things interesting, because things have to be above and below. Even if everything is the same except for one number, that number will matter. Because again, everything has a most efficient option and a least efficient option. So there's no way to make something perfectly balanced and still have meaningful difference. And we're talking about characters that are naturally, by their very nature, different. Spider-Man is not Captain Marvel, is not Baron Zemo, is not Red Skull, is not Captain America, is not Blade. The differences are what make the characters the characters. So perfect balance is actually anathema to any game like this. And that's the way in which you have to approach this stuff and look at it. And so that's kind of my answer on perfectly balanced. I don't think we've ever perfectly balanced anything because we've never tried. Even chess isn't perfectly balanced because there's a first player, there's the first player advantage, right? So every piece is the same, but perfect balance is it's a weird thing. And a lot of people talk about it like it's the holy grail of, well, the game would be the most enjoyable if it was perfectly balanced. And it's like, no, it wouldn't. It would be boring. If it was even possible, it would be boring. None of us would be here. Nobody wants an experience where I think the best the best example, which isn't even true, is if you go to Street Fighter and you say Ken versus Ryu. Literally the same character with different costumes. But once you dig into the data, it's not the same. They actually have some meaningful balance differences in terms of what they can do. And so, again, it's perfect balance is just something people like to throw out and pretend like that's what's going to make them enjoy a game when actually they don't even know what they're asking for, because it's not what they want. I find that a lot of the times when people complain about perfect balance and all that stuff, what they're really saying is that my favorite thing isn't the most efficient thing. And it's like, well, yeah, more often than not, unfortunately, your favorite thing is probably not going to be the most efficient thing. Because if that's all you're judging things on, there's only going to be one of those. Like, there can't be 3 things that are the most efficient. That's not how it works. But if that curve, if that band is really close, then even if you like the least efficient thing, through good skill, through the application of skill, a little bit of luck, and some clever strategy meaning like, your list building, your team tactic card selection, all that, you can make that thing the most efficient, and you can defeat the most efficient thing in the hands of a player who either has less skill, did not plan accordingly because they were just like, oh, this is efficient, all of that stuff. And that's what makes games great. That's what makes you go back. That's what makes you think about list builds all the time. Not necessarily the what's the best thing ever, I put all these efficient things together, and now I'm the most efficient. And even if you do that, good game design and development forces that to not be the only answer. Because each crisis asks you a different question. Each combination of characters asks you a different question. Each opponent asks you a different question. Just because you have pure numbers efficiency doesn't necessarily mean you have the winning formula cracked. And that, I think, is, that's the secret sauce in clearly our opinion, and definitely my opinion, of what makes a game great. I don't want a game where all I have to do is solve an equation and now I'm at the top end of the game. I want a game that's going to ask me so many different questions and rely on me to be a creative problem solver at multiple stages that is going to keep me hungry to come back for more, because I'm going to say, okay, well, I did this and it worked out really well. What if I do this? What if I want to take Wolverine and Blade and Hela and have the bleed team? How do I maximize that efficiency? What are the questions that I need to be able to answer? What are the things that I'm going to struggle with? How do I defeat those things, given the tools that I have? Maybe I drop in a splash character. Maybe I look to a certain combination of team tactic cards. Maybe I need to look at certain crises and stuff. Those are the things that make it interesting, Maybe those characters are the most efficient. They're probably not. Again, only one thing can be the most efficient thing. Yeah, maybe I'm going to take Winter Soldier because he's part of Team Bleed. That's amazing. Let's do that. Like, all these things are so important, and they make the game fun. They make the game exciting. They make everything work the way that you want it to. And they keep you coming back. And I think that's why it's always, tier lists to me are always so hilarious, because it's like, okay, well, these characters are S tier. Like, well, but only one of them can really be at that tier level. Maybe you could say this character is the best at X threat, and this character is the best at X threat, but that's not how they usually go. It's usually like, well, these characters are just the most powerful. So what does that mean? Well, whatever it means for the raider, and that's fine. And that can be helpful. I mean, I understand what those things are doing, but at the end of the day, again, only one thing can be the best. But good game design, especially for games like this, it doesn't end there, You can't make everything, quote unquote, the best, or it's all the same thing. And that's not what we do. So is there anything that's been perfectly designed? No. Are there character designs I'm really happy with and excited about? Absolutely. I am ecstatic about Amazing Spider-Man because I was able to go in and do some really crazy stuff, and our amazing developers led by Pagani were able to turn that crazy design, those design wants, into things that actually functioned in the game. Like, when I was sitting at my computer dreaming up momentum and what in my head I wanted Spider-Man to do, which was web swing into a dude, kick off of him, and then go punch another guy. and be just kind of like all over the map. I wasn't really sure if what I was asking for or what I wanted was going to be possible. But it's a testament to the amazing team that we have here that it worked. And we were able to do that. And it tells a story, and it's so thematically perfect. And it's something that sets that Spider-Man apart from other Spider-Mans or any other character. And will somebody else get that ability? Yeah, maybe. Maybe we'll see momentum come back again. Maybe it'll be on another Spider-Man. Maybe it'll be on some other character. Who knows? But that was such a great experience. It was so fun to develop. Dr. Voodoo, once again, another one that I just love developing because I love that character, and I wanted Voodoo to have this incredible kind of weird stuff going on with Brother Daniel and how he functioned and what he could do. And, you know, you dream it, you have an amazing team that can turn those dreams into actual crunchy rules that work. You have amazing playtesters who tell you, like, okay, well, you're kind of breaking the curve here and here. This guy's pushing the bell curve too far apart. How do we fix it? Maybe we can try this. Maybe we can do that. You get a fantastic art team and sculpting team with Marco and Dallas and the engineers, Evan, Corey, Bexley, Kevin. And all that stuff comes together and it becomes perfectly balanced. That's perfectly balanced. So there you go. There's my TED Talk for today. I don't know if you were ready for that rant, but it's my rant. This is my hour, and I'm mostly unsupervised. BK can barely stop me. I have been quite in love with a lot of the characters that we've gotten to develop and that are coming next. And I think part of that is just the fact that we have, you know, we have so much to do and so many people to look at. It's very exciting. It's a lot of fun to get to dive into some of these characters. Some of them are well known, some of them are not. But all of them are meaningful and exciting to somebody. And they're all different, you know? If I had to come to work every day and we were just, and I think this is true of all the developers, I'll go out on a limb, I'll say it. I think everyone in development and probably even everyone in the art and sculpting side would agree with this. We just came in and made the exact same perfectly balanced character every time, but slapped a different coat of paint on it. Man, that would be boring. Like, I don't want to do that. At all. I want to make awesome, unique, full of flavor characters. I want to challenge things and push bounds and try different things and be like, oh, did that work? Did this work? What can we do? What can't we do? That is where the fun is, both as a player, as someone who gets to do this job for a living, and as a steward of this amazing property, which is full of character. I can't take credit for the Aunt May's wheat cakes, actually. That was a Josh thing. He was very adamant that when we were working on Amazing Spider-Man, one of the team tactic cards had to be Aunt May's wheat cakes. And he went so far as to pull up the actual recipe that was published in one of the Spider-Man comics to prove to us that Aunt May's wheat cakes were so important to the character that they could be made in real life because there's a recipe for them. And as with many things that Josh advocates for, he has a true knack for understanding the soul and the heart of Marvel Comics in a way that I greatly appreciate because it is always a good North Star to orientate yourself back to. And so Aunt May's wheat cakes became a thing. And they were fun to make. It was, it's a pretty simple and safe design, but I feel like it does justice to the character and kind of the stories behind it and all of that stuff. Peter Parker gets beaten up. He's all roughed up. He goes and eats those wheat cakes, and he's ready to go for round 2. Brilliant. Wheat cakes won the game. So there you go. Never underestimate the wheat cakes, apparently. Yeah, it was just one of those things. Like, I've been reading Spider-Man since my mom gave me some Spider-Man comics when I was 6 years old, and I love the Webhead to death, and I've done my best to keep up with most of his runs. And recently, I've been trying to catch up on some of the ones that I missed when I was like in high school and college, but I don't have the same innocence. I don't have that same childlike wonder that Josh just seems to have, where like I would have never thought of wheat cakes. It would not have been a thing because I'm too curmudgeonly. But Josh is just so pure. And sometimes, and so, like everything, it's a good counterbalance. Because there are times where he's just like, we have to do this. And I'm like, we're not doing that, Josh. And we kind of talk it out. But that's part of the amazing part about working on this team, is that it's full of people who, Dallas has a massive X-Men collection. He has every single issue of Wolverine up to some extent. Like, it's impressive. He's been in love with that character and that team forever. And so he brings this unique perspective whenever we're working on that stuff. And especially when it comes to the design and development of these things, like, how should this character look? What should this costume be? It's great to be able to speak that language together and to know what we're talking about and to identify, like, these were the meaningful arcs. These were the costumes that worked. These are the poses that character would do. These are the feelings of that character. Like, all of that stuff is really fantastic, and it makes it a joy to work on. And that's the real benefit of totally missing this girl's behind. That's okay. We'll come back and fix that later. I got too into what we were talking about. I forgot to paint her butt. Oops, a doodle. It's easy to come back and get. That's why I got a wet palette. I got all my paint still going. What threat would Aunt May be in the game? I mean, I would assume that she'd probably want to be in a 2. Depends on which version of Aunt May we're talking about, too, It's like Ultimate Spider-Man animated series Aunt May. She's probably a threat 3. That woman has taken out supervillains plenty. If it's like a brand new day Aunt May, she's still probably a 2, but she's probably not doing a lot. She's more like a support character. She's more like a Wong. She does something really potent, but it's not punching people. See, I can talk about Aunt May like this because I know that she's likely never coming to this game. So I'm not even breaking our own rule if we don't talk about future releases. Now we're just having some silly fun. I think we got a little too lost in arting up the blue, so we're probably not going to make this character tabletop ready in an hour, but that's okay. I think the philosophy we're talking about here is going on. I will steal in and say that the Gambit agility thing was something that I actually knew about pre-Josh. So I already had it on the initial design doc for Gambit, and when Josh saw it, he did give me the really exceptionally rare Josh Attaboy. He's like, oh yeah, you did that. That's great. I was going to bring it up if you hadn't. I was like, no, Josh, I got you. I got it. I got it. You don't have to scold me for missing that one. I did know that. So, but again, that's the strength of having so many different folks who have such strong attachment to these characters, is that it's very easy to identify when something is hitting the mark and when something is missing. You have a great group of people who can come together and figure out what exactly is missing. Or when playtest feedback comes back with a whole, like, this character's okay, but man, could they do something else, or they need some other shtick, and you go, okay, well, what can we do? And then you sit down with the think tank, and somebody comes up with, well, this character is also known for this, so maybe we could turn that into a rule. And then you know, Pagani and Sarah start coming up with, well, what if it was like this? We have this rule, we could do this. It's very much a design by comedians sometimes. And that makes everything stronger. Having one person or a couple of people devoted to only one thing, you know, you miss out on those other thoughts, those other interpretations of the character and all that. You wind up with much better, more flavorful designs when you kind of invite a wider group of viewpoints and thoughts. No, red. I don't think you can see that, but I can. Oh yeah, Superior Spider-Man was really strong. We were actually talking about it the other day. I don't remember why, but it came up during one of our meetings. We were talking about favorite Spider-Man runs, actually. And Superior came up. I really liked Spider-Geddon and Spider-Verse when Superior Spider-Man met up with what he thought was in the past Peter Parker, but turned out to be present day Peter Parker, because Ock could never believe that he would give himself up like that to Parker. I thought that was really smart writing. Really good for the character. Another fun just evolution of a character too, right? Dr. Octopus going from his classic villain stylings to becoming Spider-Man to now being the superior Dr. Octopus. It's been quite a roller coaster for him, honestly. Yeah, you could use, I've seen a couple of people on Facebook and stuff who've used Black Widow's head instead of Gamora's, like I did here, with great success. It looks quite fantastic for a Captain Marvel alternate head. And actually, the inverse is true too. So if you're a big fan of Black Widow during like the 90s when she had the shorter like crop hair, Captain Marvel's hairstyle actually perfectly mimics that. So you can swap both their heads and have, you know, long-haired Carol Danvers and short-haired Natasha Romanoff. Kind of harken back to the different looks that they've had, the different hairstyles they've had over their runs in the comics. I'd like to say that we totally planned it that way, but, you know, sometimes you just get lucky. It wasn't something we thought about at the time. We were too busy with all the other questions about learning hard plastic and how the tooling worked and all of that stuff. Getting the sculpts just right, developing the style and look of Crisis Protocol. All those fun things, all those origin story things, you know. We were still learning our powers. And that'll never stop. But we didn't really think about the whole swappability of the heads until somebody online actually did it. And we're like, oh, look at that. Don't we look smart? Don't we look smart? But now you all know the truth check, because I wouldn't smoke. I wouldn't blow smoke at you. Even though it worked out beautifully, not the original intention, not something we planned for, but I'm super excited that it works that way. All right, we need to go back and do this blue again, because, man, did we make a mistake here. That blue there. And then very carefully come in and get the blue we missed back here. Just take our time and be careful. One of the challenges with painting on stream is that typically you always go back later on and you're like, oh, I got to clean that up and I got to clean that up. Especially on this apparatus that Tony has created to keep Dallas and myself on camera all the time. You can't like turn the character upside down and stuff, so it gets really weird and a little challenging at times to make work. Nope, no cards today. We're just painting and talking. We've hopefully had I think it's been a fun chat, but I'm the only one talking, so who knows? But it's kind of talking shop about game design and what that means for Crisis Protocol, and maybe giving a little bit of insight as to what to expect for some of these character rebalances. We talked only about the things that we've already discussed with Captain Marvel at Mini Stravaganza, which is that binary is going to cost 4 from 5. I mean, I guess I could give like a little teaser and say that's not the only number on her stat card that's going from a 4 or going to a 4. That's what I meant. Not going from a 5 to a 4. That'd be crazy. But she does have another number that appears on her stat card that will be changing to a 4. So you can detective sleuth that out and see if you're right when the article gets posted, hopefully next week. Do-do-do. Oh my gosh, those colors are just wonky. Let's see if we can fix that really quick, because that is, nope. There. All right. We have 6 minutes left. Well, we finished the blues at least, so that's something. Go back in and start knocking out these reds in the last couple minutes we have with each other. So yeah, be sure to check back next week. Dallas Kemp is going to be painting up an Ultron from the core set. So I guess there's your spoiler for today. For those paying attention at home, Ultron is another character that's going to be getting some changes made. Though I think most people who like to put odds on things probably assumed that was going to be the case. I'm pretty excited for everyone to see those changes as well. And I think let's see. Who have we done so far? We talked about Cap. We talked about Captain Marvel. About Ultron. So I think that only leaves one more character from the core set that is going to be showing up. So there's your next sleuthing assignment. You can figure out which is the last character out of the core set that we haven't mentioned that's going to be getting some adjustments. Just giving you all of the challenges today. Saying things without saying things. That's what we're doing. Ultron changes are definitely more aggressive than Shuri. Not quite as aggressive as Hulk's. I don't know. This is another one of those, like, no matter what I say, somebody will disagree with me and tell me that I either like oversold it or I undersold it. I guess I'd rather undersell it. Better people be upset now than later, I guess. Pleasant surprises. Now, Ultron's changes, I'm very excited about. Definitely a character that very iconic, very important to the lore and the story of Marvel. And so it was nice to be able to kind of go back in with what we'd learned and some of the experience we had gained from other things and get to kind of take a new look at everyone's favorite murder bot. I suppose I gotta stop, but I don't wanna all this fancy red paint mixed up on my palette. I wanna use it. Oh man, how upset would everyone be if the change to the last core set character was the newsstand? It's no longer size 3, it's size 2. I don't think I'd come to work that day. I think I would just stay off the internet because I don't know that I'd be very welcome at anywhere. Can confirm that's not the last change. It's not a character. All right. Well, looks like it is about time for us to say goodbye. So I suppose I should stop painting now and get back on with other things for my day. So, are there any last questions or queries you want to try getting me to answer? Go ahead and ask away, chat. I will look at them in 1 second. So there's where we wound up on one Captain Marvel from the core set. Plenty of work left to go, but hey. Oh, see, I like painting blue. Red I find to be a tricky color, but that's where we're at. Okay, so there is our Captain Marvel. I'm gonna click this over to this like so. Clickety-clack. All right, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that you had fun. I hope maybe we talked about some things that'll get you thinking about We talked a lot about game design and development theory and just kind of how the approach to Marvel Crisis Protocol is adjusted and all that good stuff. So a little insight behind the studio to hopefully help you understand what we're doing better and just kind of give you some understanding of how we approach things and what we're looking to do. Always improving, always trying to get better at our craft to make the best and most fun, experienced games possible that tell the best stories possible. Tomorrow, you can join Dallas Kemp and myself. We're going to be kicking off a brand new Star Wars Legion painting extravaganza. So be sure to be here for that. That's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're talking all about what's coming up next for the next couple months, and we have some really fun surprises in store. And then on Thursday, we're going to be playing a game of Star Wars Legion, so be sure to check that out as well. It's going to be Pagani and myself. And then join us back next week, where we're going to have more Marvel Crisis Protocol painting action. Dallas Kemp's going to be painting up Ultron, another one of the pre-existing characters. It's getting a couple of balance changes. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a game of Marvel Crisis Protocol, likely using some of these adjusted characters as well. So plenty of good stuff coming if you're a Crisis Protocol player. And of course, if you like any of our games, we always have fun hanging out on chat with you all and painting up and playing games. Till next time, chat, it's been great. Thank you very much. Be good to each other, stay beautiful, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye.